This meeting is being recorded. Folks, we're back. It's the Q&A. I almost said it. I almost did it. I almost screwed up.
I thought I was nodding for you to say it because I'm stupid enough to be like, yeah, it's
Like,
whatever.
yes, it's the question and answer. Mike, are you at your beautiful new home in Michigan?
I am. As you
How
can
is
see,
it?
it's 3 feet wide, and it's the whole home. You see it right now.
That's
It's
it.
really good. It's really good. The bug situation in Michigan is interesting. There are more bugs.
Summertime. Yeah, it's ruthless.
Yeah, and I grew up in Michigan, but I didn't grow up this far outside of the city of Detroit. This is a bit further outside, and gee whiz, the bugs. There's biting flies. They follow you and try to kill you, and that's not cool.
We have like flies. We don't have a lot of like mosquitoes. And have you seen did I show you the fly bait traps that I put out?
No. Oh yeah, Mel was talking about that.
Dude, they're
they go
fucking disgusting. So the first ingredient, if you look on the label, is like putrefaction agent. This is fucking nasty. So it's this bag, you fill it with water and it just attracts flies. They go in, they die, but then the dead fly smell actually attracts more flies. So you go out and you look at it, you're like, oh, there's like some dead flies in there. And then you come back and there's like 10,000 dead flies in there. And it stinks. It's awful. But it can help if you're having like a lot of flies. You just got to put them away from the house, like 20 feet from the house.
Right. But then the flies go to that first.
And hopefully go there and die instead.
It's a one-way door sort of situation.
Exactly. But then, yeah, like a week later, you'll be like, what smells like rotting fat guy in my lawn? Yeah, dude, it's.
But there's no flies.
But there's no flies, so it's a trade-off, like rotting fat guy smell or no flies. So you guys got over there okay? Everything's good?
Everything's good, and I'm, as a matter of fact, just ready to get started on these questions. That's how good I am.
Hell yeah. Let's do it.
All right. Our first contestant is the Greek Trojan.
The Greek Trojan. Okay. Oh, he's got a lot.
Yahoo. All right. So he says, less a direct question, but a long-term suggestion for future content. I'd love you to do a maintenance video / series for trainees who more or less reach their goals and fitness-wise and are doing it for health and how to structure it. I understand basics like maintaining volume, keeping SFRs high, but it would be useful to see considerations in terms of metacycle design, variation, etc. People want to maintain their physique / strength / fitness they built without necessarily becoming advanced trainees. An unsexy topic that probably won't generate a massive amount of views, but it's one I'd love to see explored. Thanks for everything you do. It's actually in the docket to get this done. It's already listed. But it won't get done for probably a few years because we have that many videos in reserve, ready to be made, ready to be recorded. A bunch of them have been recorded already. So it's a thing, and eventually we will get to it. But just a quick guide is the biggest thing is how little volume and frequency you need to maintain a physique. And it's altogether different from when you need to get there. So imagine if you got there doing 6 days a week of training for an hour and a half each time with 4 days a week of training and 45 minutes each time, you can maintain your physique for sure for a long time. So it's like that. And so the biggest mistake people make is they think like, no, it's gotta be more than this. And it's usually not. James, any quick insights there?
Yeah. And so that's kind of coming at it from the minimalist approach of like, what do I need to do to just maintain? But for a lot of people who reach their fitness goals, and I would throw myself in there, some people just enjoy training, but they just don't want to necessarily push it to new levels and go through the pain and suffering that requires. So from a training perspective, I mean, you can kind of span the gambit of like pure, like kind of maintenance style training where you're just doing just enough to kind of keep what you have, or actually just doing, pretty rigorous training, but maybe not always pushing up to your MRV, or maybe not always pushing certain body parts to MRV, like your back or your legs, for example, and maybe you choose to push other ones. So a lot of the training stuff doesn't have to be, but you can be very similar to what you were doing before. And a lot of the stuff kind of works itself out with the diet. Like if you're just not doing quite as much fussy stuff with your dieting, you'll tend to hold your body weight stable anyway. And that's where a lot of it comes. So it's just kind of pick your poison in terms of how much training you want to do. Like if you enjoy training, you do more. If you don't really like doing the training, then you do a little bit less. And then kind of hitting your stride with like, what is a good healthy lifestyle in terms of your diet? How much meal prep and stuff do you want to do or don't want to do, and kind of go from there.
Yep. All right. Next up is Henrik Anderson.
Oh boy. He delivers every time. I spelled it wrong, but I still found it.
Huh. He says, do myoreps stimulate the fast twitch muscle fibers? Can myoreps be a substitute for sets in the 5 to 10 rep range? For example, this meso I'm doing good mornings in the 10 to 20 range, poor SFR with 5 to 10.
God, what is wrong with you?
We're all different. And hamstring curls in the 10 20 range as well. If I do myoreps, my hamstring curls will provide enough stimuli for the fast twitch fibers, this meso. One more example, training delts in the 5 to 10 range simply does not work for me. Will myoreps stimulate the fast twitch fibers enough for optimal hypertrophy? So first of all, we don't know for sure if high rep training actually stimulates the faster fibers significantly less. We know very likely that very low rep training doesn't stimulate the slower twitch fibers potentially enough, but we don't know if the reverse is true, because as you get close to failure, the faster twitch fibers end up kicking in anyway. Now, there's a little bit of a problem there where the myoreps, you would think, okay, each little mini set, 3 or 4 reps, all the other fibers are pre-fatigued. Maybe the faster fibers are going to be the ones that we rely on the most. And there's some truth to that. However, as you get more and more fatigued, your faster fibers actually recover less well between mini sets than your slower fibers. So they may actually start to really not contribute much. So I don't think myoreps are the answer to faster twitch specific hypertrophy. I think faster fiber specific hypertrophy, in my view, can't be done with anything short of sets of 5 to 10. Now, that being said, if you do, you have to remember another thing. Faster fibers are very sensitive to volume, and they just don't require a lot of volume. So even when they're active at the tail end or through the middle part of sets of 10 to 20, in almost every case, that's going to be 100% enough to get them to grow as big as they're ever going to be, as long as you're getting close to failure and training really hard. Now, for some folks that are so fast fiber dominant and their aerobic system is not that great, that for them, their best SFRs actually occur in sets of 5 to 10 and not in sets of 10 to 20 for some exercises, like the very exercise you described. The thing is, if you don't get great SFRs in those ranges, that kind of means you're probably not stimulating a whole lot of growth in those ranges either. And don't worry about it. If you just do the ranges with a little bit of diversity and you do mostly the ranges that give you great stimulus to fatigue ratios, I wouldn't worry about fiber types or anything like that. You're probably doing damn near almost everything you can do for the optimal hypertrophic response. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, really good. And then you can also kind of periodize, even just taking like the snapshot of the good morning, you could kind of periodize that across several mesocycles where maybe 5 to 10 isn't your jam. Maybe you split the difference and you say, okay, I'm going to do like 8 to 15 on meso 1, just because the lighter weights tend to be lighter weight tends to be a little bit better. And then maybe you really hit your stride in meso 2 with your 10 to 20, and then you kind of go from there on meso 3 to figuring out which direction you want to go. But yeah, that is kind of what what Mike said is there's really no way around lifting heavy weights for that faster twitch specific hypertrophy. And I don't think that something like those intensification techniques can necessarily kind of circumvent that. I would say, I'm sorry, I'm beating this to death and I already like giggled at it, but good mornings 10 to 20. Man, I have a hard time with that one. That I would play around with that a little bit more and see if you can do it in a way where you could load it a little bit heavier, because at that point, like your hamstring curls are covering that rep range really, really well. I mean, that particular exercise is meant for you to use a shitload of really big muscle mass sections of your body, like your lower back, your glutes, your hamstrings. So that's like ideal for loading heavy. I know it's an awkward movement for a lot of people. My suggestion would be to maybe play around with it, maybe split the difference and see if you can do like sets of like 8 to 12 that are pretty stimulative for yourself.
Super, super good advice. Next up is Rhinome, spelled Rhynome.
Got it.
All right. This is a pretty simple question. Dear doctors, when I do overhand lat pull downs, the long head of my triceps will fail before my lats. Am I defective? No. That's actually common for quite a few people. It's usually common. It's usually my experience. And I got to tell you, if you're doing lots of pulling with a full range of motion, especially at the stretch, really going like this with your pull-ups and pull downs and really stretching out with the rows, it is the long head gets so much work that when people do a lot of overhead tricep work and say, you got to hit the long head, everyone's obsessed with the long head, probably because that's the only head they know and they think it's some kind of mystical thing. It's like VMO, man. You got to hit your VMO. Like, what is
Oh my
VMO? Like,
God.
shut the fuck up. Why don't you name me another part of the quad? And they're like, it's like, exactly. Go fuck yourself. So,
VMQ.
yeah, I don't know. So the long head in most folks that are training their back properly will get so much stimulus from pulling, you don't need to train it by itself. So you can do skull crushers and things like this. You can do push-downs, things like this. You can do dips and things like that. But overhead tricep work, unless you find it has a really great SFR, isn't one of those things you need to do because the triceps are covered with a long head so well in pulling. So there's nothing wrong with you. And I would say it's just a great tricep workout. And if you just lay off the overhead tricep work and keep doing multiple sets of pulling and do some underhand work and stuff in ways that maybe your lats are pre-exhausted or actually just, first to fail, then I don't think you're missing out on anything. It's kind of like, hey, cool, this exercise also really stimulates this one super well.
Yeah, so your tricep can get conditioned to that activity. However, I would say if you're finding that you're leaving a lot on the table as a result of your triceps giving out, then it's worth playing around with some other stuff. And you might just say, like, that's just not a great movement for me for this reason, and my triceps just not quite conditioned to take that beating. And then, like Mike said, you can try some underhand variations, some close grip variations, maybe a neutral grip, stuff like that, and see if that works. Really, the ultimate question is, like, could you be doing more back training, or could you have higher quality back training if this was not a limiting factor? And if it's not a limiting factor, then just keep doing your thing and it's not a big deal. If it is, then it's worth playing around with a little bit.
Yep. Next up is Forrest Nash.
Sorry, hold on. I'm noticing this video, and I'm sensing an untapped market. How do prison inmates get big, strong, and jacked? 298,000 views. Mike, we need to open up a new division of RP called RP Prison.
Marcos Rodriguez already volunteered to run that division.
Really? See, we could get like government subsidized funding. It would be amazing.
Prison workout. Mm-hmm. The prison workout program, PWP.
Nice. More acronyms.
All right. A man who may be in prison, we don't know. Forrest Nash Fitness.
Got it.
All right. He says, hey, docs, what are your thoughts on supersetting biceps and triceps in an arm-focused workout? I know you usually recommend against antagonist supersets other than to save time. It's definitely not an issue for me since I have no friends and live for the gains. However, I find the systemic/cardio fatigue is usually pretty minimal for these exercises, and doing them in an alternating fashion, i.e. sets of curls, rest 30, 45 seconds, sets of pushdowns, rest 30, 45 seconds, repeat, gives me an awesome total arm pump, and I love doing it. I've also heard from Anna Hansen that there could be some antagonist potentiation benefits of training this way, though I imagine it wouldn't be super significant. My question is, do you think it'll be less optimal to train as I described above, rather than simply doing all my sets of biceps, then moving on to doing all my sets of triceps? Thanks for being the best. Well, thank you so much for the kind words, Forrest Nash. So I will say that there's a really good reason to try to do some of that. I wouldn't even say cross potentiations. What happens is when you're doing a curl, your triceps are still somewhat active in most folks, especially untrained people, and they actually pull back down on the joint when you're trying to activate your biceps maximally, and it results in less load being lifted. Now, it's not so great from a strength perspective because it lets you handle less load or do fewer repetitions. But from a hypertrophy perspective, your biceps still have to overcome the pull of the triceps. So generally speaking, they still get the same stimulus because they have to pull against either musculature or load, and they still reach as close to failure as they would, and so on and so forth. So I would say that antagonist potentiation benefit isn't really likely to result in a big difference in hypertrophy or a difference at all. That being said, if you really like the full arm pump, that's cool. However, a lot of times, especially if you're training triceps and your biceps get pumped, it actually limits the range of motion and the stretch your triceps can get, especially as you get bigger. And what I would do is ask you to check out how set for set your repetitions go in the bicep and tricep movements with a classic traditional amount of rest versus the amount of rest that you're giving them in the alternating superset. If the alternating superset basically results in rather similar performance and you're getting great pumps, I wouldn't worry about it. You can do either way. But if you look, I'll be honest, like when I do supersets, my reps are cut by 1/3. If I just rest in normal time and do the muscle groups by themselves, then I don't know. That's not something perhaps that's wise to do. That really is an argument for making sure you take that 30, 45 second rest, make it longer, Maybe you can do that, but still do alternating sets of biceps and triceps, but just rest a long time between. I would say one of the downsides is that it might interfere a little bit with your mind muscle connection, because you, after doing sets of curl, you might actually be learning how to curl better without any distractions. And you get much better mind muscle connection set after set after set. Where after 3 or 4 sets, you're getting the best mind muscle connection. Or if you do curl extension, it's kind of a mishmash. Maybe you can get a good mind muscle connection, but maybe it's like, oh, I have to retool for bicep curls and kind of not getting into the groove as much. So that being said, I would say that the vast majority of the reason why people do supersets in real life, like arm supersets, they just want their arms to look as big as possible in one workout, which is not usually something that's either muscle group splits like biceps and triceps on their own day separately, or push legs pull splits actually allow. And there we're trading off psychological benefits, and we're saying those are more important than potential physiological benefits. So again, if your performance is just as good, it doesn't matter. If your performance suffers because you're supersetting, if your mind muscle connection suffers, then I would say supersetting is fun and makes your arms look really cool temporarily, but long term it may not add as much muscle. So that's my take, James.
Yeah, I totally agree with Dr. Mike here. It is common for a lot of people for like your triceps and your biceps to fall on the same days. Like I know that happens twice in my my training week. So what I would say is like if it's something like if do what Dr. Mike said first and foremost, and just make sure your performance isn't totally tanking. I have not worked with anyone where it didn't tank. Let's just put it that way. Like if you ask somebody to do the supersets, it always tanks. That's just how it goes. Like if it doesn't tank for you, that's fine. That's good. Then you can roll with it. That being said, if you wanted to incorporate that strategy, I would maybe limit it to 1 session per week so that the other sessions you have more traditional just set and rep schemes for those muscles. So you know they're getting hit as hard as they feasibly can. And then you might if you have another session where you're doing the superset, it would be effectively like a light or kind of pump up style session for that week, which is also okay. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But it is a bad thing if you could just be either doing a lot more sets and reps and or a lot more weight, not doing the supersets. So just play around with it a little bit and see how it goes. Like if the numbers are comparable, then cool, have fun with it. But again, if you're using that method, I would keep it to 1 session per week.
Very good insight. Next up is Tomer, Tomer, with some whack ass anime bullshit on this.
Yeah, it's got some Naruto.
Oh, Naruto. All right.
I can't hate. I've been into Naruto lately.
I know. That's because you're also lame and also anime. Just kidding, folks. Don't get on me about that. All right. From a hypertrophy perspective, is it worth it to do some top sets of 2 to 5 reps on compounds, bench, squat, deadlift in order to drive more progression? So I'm just going to nip this in the bud right now. Not nip this in the bud. I have to comment on this as it goes. It doesn't drive more progression. It just doesn't. It makes you stronger. That is to say, your ability to lift either for 1 rep max or sets of 3 to 6, but it doesn't make you better at lifting in the hypertrophy ranges themselves. Certainly, it violates this principle of specificity. If that was going to improve your ability to lift in the hypertrophy range more than hypertrophy lifting itself, like sets of 5 to 10 will make you as good as possible in the short term, at least at 5 to 10. And there's no reason to believe it's different in the long term in this particular case. Anyway, so it doesn't drive more progression. Let's move on. And if it will drive more progression, it doesn't. There will be more total volume, sets times weight times reps used in the workout, although volume counts through sets. So here, go ahead, James.
Yeah, so the effect of the weight in that equation is insignificant compared to the changes you would see from the number of sets that you do and or the number of repetitions you do. So if you're just doing a pure, like this is like a very basic exercise science volume load calculation, you have somebody doing sets of, let's say, 225 versus 275, and you were looking at the differences in volume. You'd say, oh, the 275 was a little bit more. Okay, do 2 sets this time. Now the volume's like, literally double at this point. See what I'm saying? So that's probably not the best way of stimulating volume. And as Mike said, it is a diverging goal in terms of strength. And I would also say a very significant trade-off in terms of injury risk potential from doing more standard training.
Yes, brilliant. And then he says, so I guess my question is, assuming sets are equated, is more total volume leading to more tension hypertrophy responded when reps are same but weight is up? Well, reps can't be the same and weight up, because if weight goes up, reps have to go down if we standardize reps in reserve. So if your weight is the same, or sorry, if your reps are the same, but you can increase weight a lot, then you were just doing sandbag bullshit junk volume before, so that's no good. And he says, for example, if one is weak or trains for hypertrophy, will he benefit from 1 to 2 strength mesos so that he will come back to hypertrophy? His total volume will be higher. Thus, more tension on the muscle equals more hypertrophy. Oh, actually, we can set up this experiment. You have someone trained for strength for 8 weeks, and you have someone trained for hypertrophy for 8 weeks. And then afterwards, who's doing more volume? I guarantee you the person who's practiced doing more volume is doing way more volume. As a matter of fact, I was just at the NSCA conference giving a talk, and we're talking about this specific thing with Brad Schoenfeld and Brett Contreras. And Brad said, there's this one study that's kind of interesting, and maybe there's something to getting stronger before you get bigger. But then Brett said, look, like the girls that I have that go for strength for 8 weeks, then they transition to hypertrophy, they don't even hit their maximum rep PRs. They're like, oh my God, like I used to do this for 12s. I can't even do it for 8. And eventually, after a few weeks, they break the all-time PRs and go on and go forward. But it's literally, there's a specificity thing there where, like, if you get good at sets of 3, you're not really good at sets of 3. And it's going to take you some time to get back to sets of 10. You could have just gotten better at sets of 10 by doing sets of 10 the entire time. Now, the silver lining to this is that occasional strength training, potentially as one of the tools to just lowering volume, allows you to resensitize to volume, come back bigger and better, and really get a good progression going. So as long as you do that, which can be done with low rep strength training for 2 to 4 weeks at a time, that is really good for you. But is there some kind of magical thing by which getting stronger makes you bigger? Is there a magical thing by which getting bigger makes you stronger? Yes, because you're adding tissue and you can make that tissue stronger. Is there a magical thing by which getting stronger makes you bigger? It's just not clear that that's the case any more than just getting bigger will get you bigger, will get you bigger. And remember, there's a big opportunity cost here too. When you're training for strength, assuming you're not a beginner, you're not going to gain any size that time. And this is someone who maybe even trains for size the entire time. You're going strength size and they're going size. Even if their second size meso isn't as productive as your second size meso, which is to say your first, because you train for strength the first one, that doesn't matter because they gained a shitload of size in their first one that you haven't gained at all. So there's no way that one of your size mesos is going to be better in absolute gain than 2 of their size mesos. So there is a nuance there where every now and again, every few months, a 2 to 4 week low volume period is a really great idea. Outside of that, it's just not clear to James and I why in God's name you would train for strength. And trust me, James and I used to do it all the time. We just got dick out of it. We looked at the literature. The literature says probably get dick out of it. And then practically there's all kinds of concerns nowadays. I almost never do it, and almost no good bodybuilders do it when they know what they're doing, because it's just so high, so much more injurious. Like, imagine pulling your pec, doing sets of 3 in the incline bench, and someone's like, why did you do sets of 3? And you're like, to potentiate potential size gains. Like, can you explain the mechanism? You're like, I don't know. Like, wow, sweet. You just tore your pec for what? And you're like, I don't know. It was just fun to go heavy. And it's fun to go heavy. It's something different. Yeah, I think that honestly, and I'm going to speak frankly here, this is not to judge anyone. We're all in a different place, and it's okay. The vast majority of the reason people try to do when they do traditional hypertrophy training and they say, I'm going to go train for strength, it's just really embarrassed at how little of the weight they're handling in hypertrophy movements. Like someone who is going to be hack squatting 135 for reps of 15 or sets of 15 reps, they might go to low bar squats and do a strength cycle or two to do handle 225 to 275 in low bar squat, and they sort of feel like an adult male or an adult female. Whereas the hack squat, just one plate and change, is just not doing it for their ego. Remember, ego is a very, very different thing than actual results. So I would say that this is not clear that it's a good idea, and it has some downsides as well. James, did I hit most of the boxes, or what do you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was a great response. And I think, we kind of touch on this every now and again. It's easy to conflate strength training and hypertrophy training because they do seem to overlap quite a bit. But, in strength training, the amount of weight on the bar is the driving force and the indicator that progress is being made. So it's good when you're looking at okay, how much weight am I lifting? Because that's basically a direct measure of the outcome and the thing that's potentiating the gains that you want. In hypertrophy training, it's just not the same. The amount of weight on the bar is simply there to get you in the rep ranges and SFR zones that you need to be in. Sorry, let me rephrase that. The weight is basically a proxy for the rep ranges and the intensity zones within the constraints of the RIR that you're using, right? So if you need to hit an RIR of 3 and roughly 15 reps, It doesn't matter that you just put the weight on the bar that gets you there. That's all that matters in hypertrophy training. Whether or not that's going up or down, like I don't want to say inconsequential, but it's not as important as making progress in things like reps and volume over time. So it's a hard thing to get out of your mind, because in strength training, it's weight goes on the bar, and if the weight's going up, things are going well. In hypertrophy training, it's just, okay, I have some rep zones, I have SFR considerations, and I just need roughly the right weight to get me there within the constraints of the RIR that I'm using. And it's tough. I can see why people are reluctant to think that way, because sport training and strength training are kind of the opposite.
Yeah, 100%. Very, very common seduction away from what's probably optimal.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's tough on the ego. All right, next up is Perry Battles.
Perry Battles.
Who battles?
Oh my God,
who
it is
battles.
Perry Battles. That's such a funny name.
All right. Perry asks.
He's got a lot going on here.
Oh,
look
yes.
at you trying to squeeze in multiple questions. Perry, shame bell.
He says, ring the shame bell. He says, hey, docs, I'm assembling a list of graduate school to apply to, and I really appreciate your advice. I'd like to eventually study human performance in athletes. My current plan is to pursue a PhD in human performance/sport physiology, and I was wondering if you have any advice concerning, one, where to apply to, two, paths I could take to study sport performance after graduation. It's just one and two. Okay. And two, paths I could take to study sport performance after graduation. I chose the PhD because after talking to some grad students, my impression is that doing a PhD right off the bat versus doing a master's, then a PhD, saves some time and provides better odds of getting teaching/research assistantships. That last one is false.
Latter's not true, yeah.
Relieve you of that entirely. It's actually backwards. If you have a master's degree, they let you teach earlier. I don't have any debt from my undergrad, and I would love to keep it that way if possible. Okay. From speaking with professors in several different institutions, the picture I've acquired of researching human performance is that there are several routes. One, get a job at a small to mid-sized Arm institution so you don't have to bring tons of NIH and SF money. Try to get funding from supplemental companies that make wearables, etc. It's my understanding a lot of studies on weight training can be done fairly cheaply. This makes sense to me. Number two, get a job at a big R1 university. Essentially put your human performance studies in a public health wrapper. Tough to do, and good luck putting any human performance in that at all. Okay, let's keep going, James, and we'll let you circle back here. For example, instead of studying VO2 mostly in elite endurance runners, you may primarily study it in, for example, diabetics looking at respiratory exchange. I mean, that's just not performance at all. If by primarily you mean solely, then yes. Number three, be really phenomenally amazing and get hired by a professional or national team. That doesn't get your PhD at all. So number three is,
that's a completely different path than an academic path, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you're kind of talking about academics in 1 and 2, and then 3 is like a just profession. You don't even need a PhD, frankly. But there are opportunities. But it's just, those are diverging paths, is my point.
Yeah. Obviously, my first thought was to seek out Jedi Master Mike, but alas, you don't teach at any PhD programs that I know of. Please enlighten me if you do. My current list includes Indiana University, where I'm currently finishing my undergrad, ETSU, which does have a PhD program, Lehman College, which does not, and USF, University of South Florida, which I think does, and I think that's where Jay Hoffman might be teaching, different Jay Hoffman. Thank you for all your awesome content. Cheers. I'm going to give my little blurb here, try to help you out, Perry. Great question. And then James will slaughter all of your dreams like like unsacred cows. So number three, so the number three there should really be pay at least part of your PhD program. You'll get some tuition remission for teaching at the program. You may get full scholarship. There's always a couple available in most programs. And then you go to a mid-sized, not R1 institution. That's where ETSU falls in. There's one program that I would recommend you look into, you do not include, and that is the one at Auckland, New Zealand. That's where Eric Helms is. I think they do the occasional PhD, maybe not even the occasional. And there's a lot of PhD programs in sport performance in the United Kingdom and Australia, and they always take international students, so I would really encourage you to look through there. You could reach out to a gentleman named Jackson Pius, who is, I believe, doing his PhD right now in Australia. And there's a gentleman named Milo Wolf, who's actually one of my interns, and great guy, knows a ton of stuff, has edited our hypertrophy book and stuff like that. And he is doing a PhD in England. And there's actually quite a few PhDs in Great Britain that are sport performance oriented. And I don't know about the funding situation, but sure is something there. And then what else do I have to say about that? You almost certainly for all these programs have to get a master's degree first. So grad students in something like psychology or neuroscience, they almost just go always undergrad right to a PhD program. Nobody gets master's degrees. In our field, generally in most places, they don't even accept you if you have an undergrad yet. You have to have a master's to be accepted to a PhD program. So I'll throw that one out for you for most schools. But at the end of the day, you got to want to really like what you're doing. You've got to really interested about it. I'm not sure the quality of the program lately, but ETSU is always a place to consider. You will get an education that's put sport performance first. I've heard decent things about USF. Lehman does not have a PhD program as far as I'm aware. That'd be news to me because I do teach there. And then I would look internationally. That's, I think, all I have to say about that, James.
Yeah. So like my opinion has been changing on this recently. I actually would be inclined to not encourage as many people to do the academic route, because I think a lot of the universities are turning very shitty and charging lots of money and not giving students skills, abilities, knowledge that they are paying for. That's not totally true in all situations. And I think our field is still doing an okay job. But the fact of the matter is that you can do a lot of this stuff without having a PhD. And I would actually tell a lot of people, unless
you
PhD,
can learn almost all of it without a PhD.
Unless PhD is a bucket list item for your life, it's actually not worth it. I would just tell when we're working at Temple and people were asking about doing the PhD and they were like, "Oh, I'm thinking about," and it's like, if you're thinking about it, the answer is no, right? It's like, do you fully intend to get a doctorate or not? That's really like where that issue stops. That's my take on it. So just to address a couple of your points here, right? I'm looking at 1 and 2, and I'm not trying to condescend in any way, but let me just tell you one thing, right? As this is when you are finishing your PhD and you're looking for jobs, you're not going like, I've got like the top pick over here, cream of the crop over here. The first institution that says yes is where you're going, period. End of discussion. If it's Dildo College in New Jersey, you're teaching at Dildo College.
I love that place.
If you put out multiple offers and you get 2 yeses, like, you are phenomenal, right? Good on you. Most likely you're going to put out like 10 and maybe 1 says yes. That's how this usually works. Now, once you get your foot in the door, then it's easy to move around when opportunities open up. But, I'm just looking at 1 and 2. It's like, get a job at this. You're just going to get a job wherever there's a job available. And that might mean teaching like, biomechanics and exercise physiology, and then maybe having your own kind of line of research that you're running, maybe not, maybe piggybacking off something else. So that's that. Number 3, right? This is another one where the state of sport physiology, strength conditioning, sports science in the United States in particular is such an old boys club. There's no situation, even if you graduate with a PhD and you have glowing recommendations, 0 chance that you're going to get hired by a national team or professional team unless you have an abundance of in-field experience. Like, that just won't
connections too, knowing those people.
You have to know somebody. So unless you had been running strength conditioning or interning or pursuing some type of internship on your own free time, that's just simply not going to happen organically as a result of just graduating. That's going to be something you're going to have to like really work hard at. So that also being said, you could get a master's degree and find yourself in that same opportunity. And frankly, I think maybe even more likely, because I think there's more opportunities for getting a master's degree in like an exercise physiology related field in a lot more places, which opens a lot more opportunities for getting an internship with like a university strength conditioning team versus like only being able to go to 1 or 2 places and the competition's really high. So yeah,
James, I misread this question. I answered most of the first stuff. I didn't realize he said, for speaking of professor of several institutions, the picture I've acquired of researching human performance is that there are several routes. I think he's talking about, and this is get a job. So he's not talking about his PhD program. He's talking about after his PhD program.
Oh, I think maybe I did the same thing.
So
yeah. So, I mean,
it's actually not clear to James and I think that the 3 be really phenomenal, amazing, and get hired by a professional or national team is after the PhD, get a job at R1 after. Look, listen, once you get your PhD, you can do all kinds of stuff, including be an online coach like James Hoffman over here, or like James mostly used to be. And James and I now do more of like running the company stuff. We don't really do a whole lot of coaching, but there's tons of coaches we hired at RP that are PhDs, and there's tons of people that are PhDs that do their own coaching companies and all this other stuff. You make way more money and have way more fun doing that than doing R1 research about diabetic people, unless you really want to do R1 research about diabetic people. So you don't, get a research to just get a job at a university. Getting a PhD, just get a job at a university is like, holy shit. Like, you're going to make like $57,000 a year after 4 fucking years of brutal school. Hey, good luck. Good God. I mean, unless you are absolutely psyched on basic research and a little bit of applied research, I wouldn't go into academia after you get your PhD. So I guess there's kind of 2 questions there. It's, what do I do? Because he goes back and says, obviously my first thought was to seek out Mike. We don't teach any PhD programs. So it makes it seem like it's all one question about PhD. But in the middle here, Perry's talking about getting jobs. I would try to figure out what you want to do before getting a PhD. And this first 2, the only answer is, do you want to do this stuff? And if the answer is not really, here's another one. I'll give you a third one. Go to a small school, which has you only be a teaching professor. And then minimum research or no research, community service and teaching. And then that's what James and I did. I did that at UCM and Temple, and James did that at Temple. And then that was great because we got to do our side business the entire time until I got so big that it didn't make sense for us to go and be at school anymore. So I would say that third option is really, really awesome, unless you really like to do research. And if you really like to research, then, doing research in sports sciences is pretty tough. But I think number 1 is your best bet. And then good luck. But, small to mid-sized R1, forget about R1 if you want to do sports science. You got to do R3. Yeah. So
I think because in the beginning he was talking about like where to apply to school and paths to take. So I think we split the diff. I think we got it.
We got both now.
Yeah, we got both. I think like Mike was saying, like you kind of have 2 diverging paths, which is like, do you want to be like public or private sector, right? If do you want to be in academia, or do you want to be working in kind of the field of strength conditioning or sport physiology, stuff like that? And those just diverge at some point, right? Whereas if you want to be a researcher, then you will reach out to a program, and you'll find professors who are doing research in the field that you are interested in, and see if they have a PhD program and see if they're taking applicants, and then kind of go from there. That's like that pure academic route where you're like, okay, I actually do want to do research. I'm going to apply to a program. So my mentor is kind of within the ballpark of the field that I'm in, and then apply, right? Whereas number 3, like if you want to work in strength conditioning, like you can get a master's degree in exercise physiology or any of those related fields. But what's more important at that point is like getting some connections, getting your feet on the ground, and finding some either teams or programs where you can work with athletes. That's probably going to be more important, because it's a fucking old boys club at the end of the day. So it's, what did our friend David used to say? He's like, it's not who you know, it's who knows you.
Damn, that's wise as shit.
Yeah, I can't take that. That was David. He was full of those gems. He's going to be like the ultimate dad someday. He's going to have so many fucking one-liners and zingers. Yeah. So again, I think we kind of just to reiterate, like, think about what you actually want to do. So like Mike and I actually really wanted to teach, which is why we did the third option that Mike proposed, because we don't really want to do research. But we enjoy teaching and kind of disseminating science to other people. And so we got out a lot out of our degree because we were professors for several years and we got to teach a lot of students. And at some point we found that the private sector was in many ways more responsive and certainly more lucrative than the public sector. And so we made a career switch. But I think a lot of the opportunities that we have now are a result of us making those choices and doing the things that we did early on in our career.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Earth Savior.
That's next. Very pretentious.
Just let you know, Earth Savior.
Captain Planet over here.
Yo, Earth Savior. Hey, save this. All right. He says, should you stop cutting if you develop wear and tear issues? I've been experiencing elbow discomfort a couple of months, which, although it hasn't gotten noticeably worse, is irritated by pressing and pull-ups, so it isn't healing either. After 8 weeks of cutting, I decided to deal for a week in order to pay close attention to which exercise that irritate my elbows so that I can make technique adjustments and exercise change where necessary. I've now chosen to do a maintenance phase for a few weeks so that I can decrease frequency of pressing exercises. The main culprit is I was doing some variation of bench press 3 times per week. I'd like to finish off my planned 12-week fat loss phase. My thinking is that a few weeks of maintenance will resensitize me to volume. Therefore, I'll be able to retain my muscle at a lower volume if I choose to continue my cutting. I'd also like to shift most of my chest exercises to the 20 to 30 rep range for my elbow's sake. However, I'm not sure whether I'm likely to lose chest size by doing this. I could save you that one. If you're training hard sets of 20 to 30, you're not going to lose any chest size. And he says, do you both think my plan sounds like a fine idea, or would I be better off maintaining for longer? 2/3 length of fat loss phase before cutting again. As always, thank you both so much in advance. So the 2/3 length of the fat loss phase is just to resensitize your hormones and hunger and psychology for more dieting. If you're just going to do another 4 weeks dieting, you could just keep going. And the fact that you took some maintenance to heal up your tissues is totally fine. I would say that if you do a raw and real assessment, and in that assessment, you come to the conclusion that, well, I think my elbows are going to be just fine for the next 4 weeks, then yeah, after you finish a little mini maintenance, 4 weeks of dieting is great. If you make a raw and real assessment, or even after 1 week of dieting, your elbows just start to bleed out of your ass for you, then I would say it's time to end the cut, go do some active rest, really reconfigure exercises, do some maintaining, do some slow massing, make sure all the elbow stuff heals completely, and then later on do a serious fat loss phase that's a little bit longer than this one. So I think your plan is great as long as your elbows actually don't get much worse through that 4 weeks of cutting you plan on doing, James.
Yeah, great answer. So just to make a point, like the issue here is probably not the cutting itself so much as either your technique or your frequency or your exercise selection on sounds like the bench press. I mean, 3 times a week is probably okay for most beginners, maybe early intermediates. But once we get that kind of late intermediate stage, I would personally, if you're doing chest 3 times a week, I'd like to see like a heavy press, maybe a fly type movement, and then maybe a lighter like dumbbell press or incline press or something along those lines, for this exact reason, because your elbows can only take so much of a beating with the pressing. Most people will run into this problem if they are doing like a barbell bench press variation 3 times a week. So the cutting can kind of help you, not going on maintenance for your diet can help you like recuperate a little bit, but it's really not the issue at hand, which is like you probably need to go back and look at the things that are causing the elbow flare-ups and adjusting those. That's probably going to have more of an impact than the diet. Because really, if it's like, okay, well, these 2 bench press variations that I'm doing are really fucking up my elbows, but if I do like a cam bench press 10 to 20, it's perfectly fine. Well, you can just do that and keep cutting at that point. Then there's no reason to stop cutting.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So, but cutting nonetheless, once you do have problems, can exacerbate things. So it's your call whether or not you want to keep going. But what you did by taking a little deload and then a little maintenance phase, I think is super, super wise. You may have to do more than that, but at least you did a really good start.
It's good to nip those things in the butt before they become like unbearably bad.
Next up is Riley. Just Riley. Riley.
Roily.
Or fucking Roily. How to know when you can go for another half week instead of taking a full week deload. Also, doing only a half week deload, is it on the front end or back end of the week, i.e. starting meso 2 on the second half of the week or ending meso 1 after the first half? So which half of the week doesn't matter. You just have to make sure that your half week deload is very light weight and very far from failure and very low volume. Okay, don't just like do one less set or something and say, oh, I took it easy, because you just maintain the fatigue instead of dropping it. Secondly, I'll tell you this, your half week of deloading, if your fatigue is pretty decent, will buy you 1.5 to 2 weeks more hard training. The second time you do that in the meso, it'll buy you another week of hard training. The third time you do that in meso, it'll buy you another half week of hard training. And the fourth time you do it, just doesn't buy you anything because your fatigue is so high, half a week just doesn't cut it. Why? How do I know this? My last mass meso cycle was a sum total of 9 weeks. And I did 2 half-week deloads, and I regretted it because I should have just done fucking 2 mesos. It's just I was traveling a little bit. I had some stuff come up, and it was kind of like, oh, half week, I feel great. I would say that half week is probably something you use no more than once. And the real question is, so now that we know you usually don't use it more than once in a meso, the only question is, okay, so it says it buys you 1.5 to 2 weeks. Let's say 1.5 to 2.5. So an average of 2 weeks of progressive training after itself, on average. It might not occur for you. So then the answer of when to do that when to do the half week deload is really quite straightforward. Do you have more than 2 weeks left? If the answer is yes and you're really overreached, half week's not going to cut it. It's not going to bring you to the finish line. If the answer is you have 2.5 weeks or less, then yeah, half week could probably do you really good. So that's kind of how I think about it. Now, that's just very general advice. Specifics, the situation, knowing your own recovery, nothing beats that. You might be a person that's done this before and it easily buys you 2.5 weeks. So then you're good to go. And maybe you can do more than one in a meso. I would just say the incremental benefits really start to deteriorate after you one of them, because as your fatigue gets really high, half a week just doesn't cut it. And I tell you guys this, I was so overreached at the end of this 9-week meso that I only started feeling good after 1.5 weeks of active rest. And then only in the latter end of the 2 weeks of active rest was I like, all right, here we go. I was literally 1.5 weeks into active rest. And I was looking at weights that I had to do just for active rest, which was the easiest bullshit ever. And I was like, I don't even want to be in here yet. I don't want to be in the gym. I only got the thirst back like on that last weekend. Like, holy fuck, was I overreached. Half week deloads are like very judiciously used, but they just, to quote our old mentor, Dr. Stone, it doesn't do what you think it does. It's just, there's something about a week deload which gives you so much more life. It's almost like, a stupid analogy is, if you're hiking for like 40 miles in one day, how much does it help you to set up a picnic in the grass in between the various like miles? Like sitting on your ass in the grass with no soft padding, no ability to sleep, no ability to rehydrate a ton, no ability to really relax. You're still in the sun. You get like a sandwich and a Coke, and it's like, okay, you do that for 30 minutes. How many more miles did that add to your potential walking for that day? 3 to 5. Like, you're not getting 10 more miles out of that shit. And then when you're on mile 37, if you do a 30-minute break, how many more miles does that buy you for the day? 1 or 2. And if you do it a third time, it buys you another half mile, and then you just collapse, because there's nothing at that point that a little picnic in the grass in the hot sun will do for you. Your fatigue is so high, you need to go to home or go to a hotel and sleep in a bed for 12 hours after a shower and the biggest meal of your life. And then you're ready to go another 10 or 20 miles. So it's kind of like that. It's just some things just, you really need a big reset, which is why James and I are always for auto-regulated plus pre-planned progressions, because some things you can't auto-regulate your way out of. You need a way bigger break than auto-regulation alone would call for. James?
Oh, actually, that last point is I was waiting to ask you about. So like for me, half deload is a strategy that you would use in an auto-regulatory fashion, not a pre-planned fashion. So I don't know, Riley, I'm not sure if this is the angle that you were coming at this question, but I was imagining somebody saying like, okay, I'm going to plan to train for 4 weeks, then take half a deload, and then, try and push a few more weeks after that. That I think would be kind of a misuse of that strategy. Really, you should just plan your meso length so that you can just train continuously until you can't train, and then you deload and then rinse and repeat. This would be one where you found yourself in a situation that you did not anticipate, and you just need to do a little bit of damage control. That would be my take. What do you think, Dr. Mike?
I think that's very good. You can pre-plan half-week deloads, but the next question is, why are you doing that? Scheduling, if you're like, look, the way my vacation works this time is I got to put in 7 weeks. So can I do 4 weeks, half deload, and then finish off like 2.5 weeks? The answer is probably yeah. But if you have a free open schedule, I would just train hard, take a whole week of deloading. Because again, a whole week of deloading is like a really good night's sleep after a big meal. It heals you in ways at a qualitative level that little naps can't do. I guess an even better analogy I should have made instead of a stupid marathon walking analogy is naps versus full night's sleep. Can a nap, if you're like on a trip around the world, can naps give you the ability to go from being on a 24-hour cycle to maybe surviving a 36-hour cycle? Yes. But can you nap your way to a 48-hour cycle and still be sane at the end of that? You need some sleep. You need to get in a couple REM cycles at a time. And there's no number of 1.5-hour naps that you can close the gap for a full 2 days of being awake. It just not going to happen. So it's one of those.
Yeah. Or meth. Meth is good for that too.
Oh, yeah. You'll be awake, but you won't be sane.
You won't be arrested either. You'll just be awake.
Exactly. All right. Next up is actually Sirgitfidel. Good God. Sirgit.
I'm trying to get. There we go. Oh, okay.
All right.
Sirgit. Yeah, what?
Yeah.
That's quite an avatar, too.
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
He says, Hey docs, what are your thoughts on pre-workout supplements? What components do you look for in them? Any particular standouts and products in the market? I will bow out for this one, Dr. James Hoffman, expert
Yeah.
on pre-workouts.
I mean, man, pre-workout is it's an excuse to do drugs, right? That's really what it is, folks. No, it's yeah, it's I don't look for anything in particular. So with pre-workouts, people respond very differently. So the one thing that you probably want is, caffeine, right? That's really what you're going for in that. After that, there's all sorts of other bullshit that they put in there, like creatine, different types of creatine, most of which are probably trash. So at that point, like creatine's kind of hit or miss because if you're already taking creatine mono, it's like, okay, well, whatever trash creatine they put in there doesn't do shit. Sometimes they'll have beta alanine and niacin, which is if you like to feel like you have fire ants all over your skin, that's great. If you don't want that, and some people are more sensitive to that than others, like they can cause like really severe flushing and more pain sensation. So that's kind of hit or miss depending on if you like that or not. Yeah, I mean, really, it's just like you're just taking a really big dose of stimulants at that point. You can get largely the same effect. I don't know what it is. Like there seems to be like people think that like having a whole pot of coffee is somehow like worse than getting the equivalent amount of caffeine from like a pre-workout. You know what I mean? There's like some weird stigma with that. So I don't know. Pick ones that you like. Some have like thermogenic agents that make you like really hot and sweaty. If you're into that. The thing with pre-workout, I like pre-workout. I'm I like that like kind of amphetamine fix kind of feel, but really it's just an excuse to give you something to take like something that makes you hot, sweaty, gives you a boner, and makes you take a huge shit. Which I mean, coffee can largely do that. So I don't know. I don't really look for anything in particular. There's just a couple that I like. I have found some that didn't sit well with me. I was using the Total War, and I started to get like fluttery chest every now and again. So I stopped using that one because probably not great.
Yeah.
What else? Super Pump. Back in the day, I used to use Super Pump, and it used to just give me the super dump. And then they came out with like Super Pump Max, which was just basically like, if you guys have ever seen a dog drink ocean water and they just have the continuous spray of poo coming out their butts, that's what Super Pump Max is basically. Yeah, that's really all I got on that one. It's just use the ones that you like. You're really just getting your caffeine fix at that point.
Yeah, they're all caffeine delivery mechanisms at the end of the day. There's just not a lot of anything else that, I don't want to talk that shit too much, but that's basically at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's just a way to get caffeine, and they'll put all kinds of other shit in there. Most of it just doesn't do anything.
Yeah, they'll say like, oh, it has all this like NO pump stuff, and it's like, man, it doesn't do shit. I'm trying to now I'm thinking about it. Like they put so much crap in that stuff.
Oh yeah.
You're really just getting it for the flavor. Really just pick the flavor that you like.
And the color. It's a cool
and the color,
blue, red.
The worst is when they have exciting flavors, but the color is like just white or gray. And you're like, this sucks.
What the fuck, dude? I'm not convinced this is strawberry. This is white. I don't care how it tastes.
Mm-hmm.
I wish the flavors were just the colors. Just red.
I had the Bang one. That one's okay. It's like it doesn't hit like a truck like some other ones do, but it works. It's fine.
Like a dump truck.
Yeah.
Shouty like a dump truck. Hello, Shorty. All right. Last but not least, excellent question here from David Parker.
Lame name.
It looks like a real estate manager you might want to give money to.
A legitimate person.
Yeah. If you get ill during a cut.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mike. I can't leave this one alone. Look right below. Roan John, relationship expert.
Whoa, cool.
That's his handle.
Dude, I want to know how to do relationships. Roan,
I know. We're late in the game. We needed your help before. Now we're married. Fuck.
Yeah, what the fuck, man? We could have been married to better people. Honey, I'm just kidding. My wife.
Uh-oh. We're going to have to wrap up this webinar.
All right. So David Parker asks, if you get ill during a cut, sore throat, cough, sniffles, cough/cold sniffles, do you jump back into maintenance calories until you feel recovered? Yes. What about the flu? Maintenance for a few days longer just to be safe? I'll nuke my immune system for Shred City, bruh. Mike's Gem Best Jim Bro impersonation voice. Side note: there should be a Bro Mike character in the future RP videos. I'm sure he'll be making his appearance. People like Russian Mike. Bro Mike is a very well practiced man. All right, so here's the deal. We'll give you more than you asked for because we'll talk about training as well as diet. If you get mild sniffles during a cut until you feel better, and this is a really good time to do something like a half week deload on your training and go to maintenance calories until you feel recovered. Why? Because normally on a mass phase, you might be able to train through a little sniffles and just get better. On a cut, your immune system is already teetering on the brink of dog shit. And if you push it then, you may get sick, and then that'd be really bad. If you have flu-like symptoms, which is to say like systemic symptoms, not just local nasal throat stuff, but like fever, chills, etc., what you need to do is go to deload/active rest, of course, consuming maintenance calories until you feel real good, and then slowly ease back into your fat loss. That's my best take on it. I think you can get away with more aggressive things in many cases, and I think in most cases, that's really, really fucking stupid. So actually, I was prepping for my bodybuilding show this past year, and I got COVID-19 before I was going to do a show in Vegas, and I ended up having to go do a show in Florida because I got a positive COVID-19 test, and I felt all of COVID-19 when I got it. I was like, oh, okay. I suspected I had it, and I walked into the testing center, and they were like, yep, you sure do have it. And I was like literally already like water depleting that day. It was Friday. The show was supposed to be Saturday. And I was like, God damn it. So I basically just went into deload, ate at maintenance calories, and got plenty of rest. And then about half a week later, I was able to start training in my garage at home. And then half a week after that, I was kind of ready to go do big things. And of course, I waited the requisite amount of time in order to, develop antibodies and go out in public. But then I was training full blast. If I had kept pushing it and I haven't done the show, et cetera, I could have, been in the hospital or something like that. And that's probably not going to happen to you. You're probably going to get, you're not going to get COVID. You're probably just going to get the regular flu. I'll tell you what, guys, and maybe James has some stories about this. I know I do. The regular flu, if you don't let it run its course and you keep pushing it, can turn into like a 3-week ordeal where you feel so fucking bad. And then you lose tons of muscle and strength and everything. You'll lose muscle and strength one way or the other. You can lose a little bit of it by going into active rest and just chilling out and doing a super, super easy training. Or you can lose a bunch of it and take a month or two to come back, depending on if you pull back soon or not. So I would say that's kind of the rules of the game. James?
Yeah, I think that was a great response. I think just sometimes too, like I'm very much of the opinion, like don't, especially if you train at like a Globo gym or a public gym, like, don't be an asshole and get everyone else sick just because you want to go to the gym. But sometimes like if you, I've noticed this with myself and Mel in particular, you might be getting kind of like, you wake up and you maybe have a little sore throat, kind of like the pre-sick symptoms. You're not like full on sniffles yet, but you're like, oh, I might be getting sick. And you kind of know like tomorrow you're probably gonna be sick. But sometimes if you just have like a good night's sleep and a relatively easy day, you can kind of shrug it off. And the next day you're basically fine. So I would say you don't have to be hyper conservative in this regard. Like if you're having some like pre-symptoms, but you're not like full on sick yet, I think you probably just kind of carry about your day as normal. Maybe take like an easier training day or a day off. And then if the next day you feel normal, then you can just keep going. What I just wouldn't want is for somebody to be like, oh, I got a little scratch in my throat today. I'm not going to train for 3 days and I'm going to throw my diet off and do all this other stuff. When the reality is like, as long as you have a relatively uneventful day and don't have a lot of stressors going on, you might shrug it off and you might just carry on as normal. So just, you can keep that in the back of your mind. But also again, like like I said, I tend to not appreciate when people come into the gym sick and get everyone else sick too. So there's a delicate balance to strike between those two things.
Boom. And I don't want to say better safe than sorry, but on the margins, a little bit better safe than sorry. So feel free to push it. But when you're like, oh, I'm really not feeling good, don't keep going because you're just going nowhere. And it's not like, oh, I'm tough. Like you can be tough and do smart shit instead of be tough and do
dumb shit.
Yeah,
I agree. Was that it for questions?
That's it.
Dr. Mike, did you happen to catch UFC this last weekend?
I was going to make a really shitty joke at Conor McGregor's expense. I was going to say I didn't have a chance to hobble over.
Oh.
No, I didn't catch it, but I heard it was all sorts of interesting.
Yeah, the most of the cards were like, okay, it was fine. And then the main event was definitely interesting. You can kind of, I watched the video back a couple times, and I think where he throws the rear teep kick, Dustin goes up to block. He didn't really like check it, but I think Connor catches him right on the elbow.
Ooh,
I think that's where he
that must
gets
have hurt so much.
injured. And I think you can kind of see he's kind of like, that's my take on it. I've watched it a couple times. I'm not sure. It could also have been like he might have already had an injury there from training camps or whatever. Or he was also kicking really hard. I don't know if you've seen, but the first couple kicks he threw were really hard. He might have actually injured himself just kicking Dustin. It's totally possible. But it was interesting. He was very inglorious and kind of shameful in defeat, unfortunately. Was just talking.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, like, part of me doesn't blame him because it was a horrible injury and it's all the spotlight's on him. And it's really, it was more about him than Dustin. So of course he's going to be flustered and pissed off, but he was like saying how he was going to kill Dustin's family and he was calling his wife a hoe.
Wait a minute. Before or after the fight?
Both, actually.
No. After?
Yeah. It's it was very, like I said, very kind of inglorious, unfortunately for him. It was like not a great moment. He was just talking shit the whole time. He was talking shit before in the pre-fight conferences and all that stuff. And not a good look.
Yikes. A lot of people say that like Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor talk that shit because they're master manipulators and they know how to get the ratings in the millions. And I think that might be true. But then there's an alternate hypothesis to consider is that they're pieces of shit to begin with and they just fall right into who they're supposed to be. Yeah. Just like
mask comes off, you default back to your normal self.
Yeah, who know, right? And they're like, oh yeah, it's all for the likes or the money or whatever. But when you fall into something that easy, and there's also like they cross the lines that again you could say maybe they're crossing the line for money. Like when you talk shit about someone's family, it sure gets them going and it gets the fight numbers up. But then again, like if you were really a calculating, manipulating person, maybe you would be like, yeah, no, I'm going to do what it takes, WWE style, but I'm not going to go further than that and get
like
really
Chael
personal.
Sonnen. Yeah.
Chael Sonnen's great at that, but maybe that's not enough. So I don't know. I'm always like Ronda Rousey made some kind of tweet where she like said something about the Olympics or something. She was like, "Oh, like the Olympics are cool." Like she's like, "If you want to see sportsmanship, go watch the Olympics. They sure could use the views." And I just like my first response in my own head was like, hey, remember your face got broken into 50 different pieces and then you never won another fight again? Who the fuck are you, by the way? Like, hey, like you're good at one thing is punch people in the face and then doing that armbar thing. And now you can just have a good whole time of shutting the fuck up and being a nobody again. So it was kind of like, they were like, oh, Dr. Mike, that's really mean. Like, well, she said mean things too. Now we're all being mean. Isn't it fun? Like, oh, it's not fun when it's about you. So it's kind of like, it's either all in good fun or it's not, So it's so funny when people get pissed at what Connor's saying and like, hey man, he's just being a sportsman. Like, so am I, like he's talking that shit. So am I. So
yeah. Well, and it's like you also don't wish people to have horrific injuries because like whether you like Connor or not or whomever else, it's like they've got families, kids and stuff. It's like nobody wants that. So a lot of the narrative was like, well, karma's a bitch, right? Like you talk all that shit and now you're hurt. It's like, no, it's a fucking sport. It's a fucking sports contest. First of all, like everybody runs the risk of injury. It can happen and nobody wants it to happen. And it's very unsatisfying for both parties because, like I was rooting for Dustin, but now it's like Dustin doesn't get the nod because the narrative is like O'Connor got injured rather than Dustin defeated him, So it sucks. It's unfortunate, but yeah, it was an interesting card.
Agreed. Next fight card, James Hoffman versus Dr. Mike, UFC 5000.
Panjitsu rules.
Oh man, I'm going to lose.
Yeah. Trying to pull that deep half. You're going to get that finger and butthole.
Folks, Panjitsu is a sport developed by James Hoffman and his illustrious wife, Dr. Melissa Davis, where it's like jiu-jitsu, but the rules are that you get a lot of points for trying to essentially, grab somebody's genital region, and you have to be the defense for those grabs. What is it? Is finger and butthole an instant submission, or is it just like a shitload of points?
It's like 5 points, like right off the bat, right? Like
it's tough to recover from that. So, a lot of jiu-jitsu positions traditionally just are really, really like, inverted guard. You're just not playing that anymore because somebody can rack up 20 points on you before you know what's happening. So Panjitsu is a tough sport.
And you can't clinch in that position either, right? You can't defend.
No. And then also like you get, you have crab guard, right? Where it's like, you like model like a crab, and that's a crab guard's really good because you've got the claws. And if anyone's going to be talking that shit, they're getting a claw. I'm sure
our listeners are like, what the fuck are they talking about?
What are they talking about? Someone's going to Google Panjitsu. If you ever see Chad Wesley Smith in real life, he's in on the jokes and just be like, hey, I heard you a Panjitsu world champion. He's going to laugh.
He'll get a laugh out of it. Yeah. All right. Is there any housekeeping for this week?
No housekeeping, but maybe some exciting stuff ahead that I can't quite talk about yet, but might be unfolding in a few weeks. So wait and see, folks. Wait and see. But tons of really, really good YouTube content coming your way. I will tell you this. Okay, so a little housekeeping. We have recorded something like 9 training videos in the Dragon's Lair in Las Vegas before we moved to Michigan. So there's lots of cool stuff coming up and some really zany characters. So,
Oh, is your Michigan gym up and running yet, or still work in progress?
it's not. So basically, we're going to have like a little private training facility here. It's not a public gym. It's not a private gym. It's just a YouTube studio / home gym. But it's quite large. We'll unveil it when the time comes, but it's still 2 months out. We're still like receiving equipment. Got to put flooring in. It's already insulated. The structure's up. Got to put electricity in and all this other stuff. Work in progress. But at some point, we'll make a really cool YouTube video introducing the, probably call it like a Renaissance gym or something like that. It'll be really neat.
Can I get a key fob to answer?
No.
Damn it.
Our guard dogs are instructed to shoot on sight. Right, they do have guns.
They're just going to be doing one of
bulldog,
those.
Guard dog. Bulldog is the worst possible guard dog because he just doesn't care if you come in or go. And if you come into a house which has a bulldog, you're probably going to get like slobbered on and cuddled with and not attacked. Funny enough, like Tweety Bird and Sylvester the cat. Remember like Spike the bulldog in those cartoons?
Yeah.
Like, where the fuck did he get a mean bulldog? I've never seen a mean bulldog in my life.
Speaking of Looney Tunes, I didn't realize they were making another Space Jam movie.
Oh, with LeBron, right?
Yeah, I saw an ad or a commercial for it, and I was like,
sense.
what the fuck? You serious?
That makes sense. I got a funny joke for you that's not appropriate.
Off camera joke. All right, folks, we have off color jokes to make. We're getting out of here. Thanks again for the questions. Make sure you guys upvote questions that you like before submitting your own. And then if other people like yours, they'll upload them too. So that's pretty sweet. Until next time, we are out of here.
Peace.